Welcome to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 58, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. So welcome. If you're a new listener, I appreciate you dropping in and checking us out. And if you're an existing listener, and particularly one of those who recently left some comments or ratings on Apple Podcasts, I appreciate you because that helps the new people to find us. I've gotten some great feedback in the last couple of weeks, and I love that some of you are taking time out of your day to let me know what you think about the podcast. That really does help me to know what direction to go and what kinds of topics are of interest. What have I been sewing? Well, amazingly, after coming back from that trouser drafting class, I have not been making trousers. I need to do a little bit more research and study on trouser construction, and I've ordered a few books, and I'm learning about the different ways to add details like pockets and zipper flies and things like that. So that's going to take me a while to work through before I feel like I'm ready to jump in and make myself a pair of trousers. I did finish the I Spy quilt and the baby quilt for my cousin's grandchildren. Those have been overdue for a bit, and I'm hoping to get them shipped off to Ohio this week so that they can be enjoyed by the kids. I made two zipper hoodies for the grandsons of my best friend Susan. Her grandsons live right up the road between Susan's house and my house. And I get to see them a couple of times a week. So Susan very graciously lets me borrow her grandchildren since I have none of my own yet. And I made them a couple of zipper hoodies. I had a lot of fun making the zipper hoodies. I picked out some fabric that had construction equipment on it because they are very much little boys and they love construction equipment. I will tell you that I did get a little frustrated with the pattern, and I don't want to single out this pattern company because I think this is more of a general issue. I've seen it with other pattern companies, and I'll just say that I was frustrated by trying to determine what kind of zipper to get for these hoodies because the pattern only says a separating zipper. A separating zipper, as its name implies, separates at the top and bottom of the zipper so that you can get into something like a hoodie or a jacket. But there was nothing more specific than a separating zipper. And if you go to, let's just say, go to the Joann Fabrics website and do a search for separating zipper, you will discover that there are probably 8 or 9 different varieties of separating zipper. And the choice of zipper does make a difference in this particular pattern. So I didn't realize that I think when this pattern was developed, all of the pattern testers used a metal zipper. And one of the features of this pattern is that the zipper can be shortened for each different size. And the pattern does give instructions for shortening the zipper. It says to pull the teeth off with a pair of pliers. Well, that works for a metal zipper, but it doesn't work for a nylon coil zipper, which happened to be the kind of separating zipper that I chose. So I had a few run-ins with the zippers, and I destroyed one completely before I figured out how to shorten it. Shortening a nylon coil zipper is a little bit different than shortening a metal zipper. And the only thing I want to say about this is if you are writing patterns, if you are producing patterns for people to use, more information is better than less information. So go ahead and say, testers made their samples using metal separating zippers. If you choose a different kind of separating zipper, this is what you need to know. So when I was doing knitting patterns, we would always include the actual yarn used to knit that sample garment so that people could actually pick that skein of yarn up and look at it and get a sense of what kind of yarn would be best for that particular pattern. and not having sufficient information to make informed choices when making a pattern is one of my pet peeves. So that's all I'm going to say about that right now. Although I will tell you that there is going to be an episode in the near future on nothing but zippers, because I think there is a tremendous amount of information on zippers that needs to be distributed. And I think that zippers are one of those topics where everyone assumes that you know everything there is to know about zippers. And I don't think that's true. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay, what else have I been sewing? Well, I sewed a sweater, and I keep thinking that someday someone is going to show up and knock on my door and demand that I turn in my master knitter certificate because I'm not knitting my sweaters anymore, I'm sewing them. Sweater knits are some of my favorite fabrics to play around with, and I found a Nordic style sweater knit on the Walmart remnant rack, and I brought it home because I wanted to monkey around with it and experiment with some pattern hacks, and I ended up with a wearable muslin. I will probably wear it several times this winter, and it did give me a lot of information about some other sweater knits that I have in my stash that I'm hoping to sew up pretty soon. Probably like most of you, I have way more projects than I have time. I have a guest interview for today's episode, and my guest is Alayna Rasile. Alayna is on the board of the Montana Fibershed. I reached out to her back in June, I think it was, and if you have ever been to Montana or if you know anything about Montana, you understand that our summers are very short and a lot of activities have to get squeezed into a 3-month period of time. So Alayna and I emailed back and forth over most of the summer, trying to find a time that would work for both of us, and we finally reconnected a couple of weeks ago and sat down for a discussion about fibersheds. I was first introduced to the concept of a fibershed in my interview with Alex Jackson back in episode 30, and he lives in Colorado and belongs to a Colorado fibershed. So I went looking to see if Montana had one, and lo and behold, they did, as do many other states. And I thought it was important to bring that awareness to all of my sewing friends, because where does the fabric that we sew with come from? And I think it's important to understand the chain from producer to end product and how that works. So we're going to hear from Alayna about how the Montana Fibershed got started and where it's going in the future. And I think it will be interesting. And I'll put the links in the show notes so that if this is a topic that you want to explore in further detail, you'll be able to do that. I'm here with Alayna Rasile, who is one of the board members for the Montana Fibershed. And we're going to have a conversation about what a fibershed is and what kind of impact their organization is making. Fibersheds are a national organization, as I understand, and each of the states can have an organization of their own. So we'll find out what's going on with the Montana organization. And as I was telling Alayna before we started talking, I have been a hand spinner. I don't do it as much as I used to. I would love to have sheep. I do have friends that have sheep. I have always, and having been a knitting designer, I have always been interested in fleece to fiber, fleece to yarn, and finding out about the fibershed has been really, really fascinating. So we're going to talk about that today. So welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So you are co-chair of the organization, and you told me earlier that the organization has been around kind of in an informal capacity for about 5 years
Mhm.
and has been a 501c3 nonprofit since about 2021. So I will let you kind of take it from there. And why don't we start with your own personal background?
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me. I'm from Montana originally. I was always interested in like fiber and textiles and sewing from a really young age, but I never really pursued it seriously till much later in life. I grew up around handmade, beautiful textiles. My grandmother was a weaver, and my mom did a lot of spinning and knitting and crocheting and but it wasn't until I was in my like mid 20s, I moved to New York City and I started working for a design studio that quilted maps. And I got, weirdly enough, I got involved in that because my undergrad degree was in geography. So I kind of met this quilting world in a really interesting way. And I got just really involved in all sort of textile arts. And around that time, I also inherited my grandmother's floor loom, and I started teaching myself to weave with just, the lifetime supply of yarn she gave me. And so I just really started becoming invested in all of these crafts and art forms. And then in 2014, I was awarded a year-long artist residency at the Textile Art Center in New York City. And that really launched me in like a whole new direction into like all realms of textiles and fashion and natural dyes. Um, kind of, it was a program that was kind of a stand-in for a traditional MFA program. It was very intensive and a lot of mentors and connections in the fashion industry. So that kind of changed the course of my life a little bit. And over the last decade, I've been working for various soft goods and furniture and fashion designers, um, and have had my own entrepreneurial endeavors. One of which is called Absorka, and it's my own clothing line of just bespoke, one of a kind pieces. And I have a little atelier here in Livingston, Montana, and I sew custom work and make small batches for various stores around the state, but mostly just sell one of a kind pieces out of my studio. And I'm also a teacher at Montana State University. I teach in the art department and am on the board of Fibershed. And yeah, I don't have any animals, but I'm in good company with so many fiber people here in Montana. So
That sounds great. It doesn't sound like you're sitting around doing nothing.
no, never.
Before we talk a little bit about how you got into being part of the fiber shed, let's define what a fiber shed is for our listeners because that might be a new concept to some people.
Yeah, yeah. So a fiber shed is a geographic region, and it can be big or small, but it's basically encompasses a network of um, fiber farmers, fiber producers, and consumers. So it's a term that's kind of stolen from the concept of a watershed, where all of the streams and rivers within a system of valleys come together. And we hear people talk about food sheds too, where, all of your local food is coming from in your geographic region. So, the Montana fiber shed is quite large. It's the entire state. Some states have smaller little regions um, because they have unique geography, and so ours is just kind of the entire state boundaries. Though the delineation of state lines doesn't mean much in terms of like your fiber system.
I assume it's not just limited to animal fiber.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. So we have actually we encompass like fiber, and we even say dye systems within our mission. So we're interested in all sorts of stuff here in Montana. The big thing other than wool that we're excited about is flax. So we piloted a project this summer that we can't wait to do again next summer, where it's called One Square Yard. And so this is kind of borrowed from a lot of the fiber sheds over in kind of Pennsylvania and on the East Coast that have linen industries historically, um, because the climate of Montana is actually very appropriate for growing flax. And so we sent out flax seeds, fiber flax seeds to around 30 people who grew just a small plot of it. And there's some really amazing kind of mentors we have in Montana who've devoted a lot of time to figuring out how to process flax and make linen, building the equipment and everything. And so we're kind of in this multi-year process of having them um, teach us more about how linen is made and if flax could be a viable crop here in Montana.
I have some flax growing in my garden, but it's ornamental. I
Well, if
haven't.
you want, I can send you some fiber flax seeds. We have so many.
I thought you were going to say hemp at first because up here in the Flathead, I'm in a different part of Montana
Mhm.
from you. Up here in the Flathead, hemp has become quite the cash crop. And we actually
Yeah,
have a friend who is a hemp farmer now. So
very cool.
I've been using some of the hemp waste as mulch in my garden.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
we have one of our business members, our Fibershed members is IND Hemp, and I think they're mostly out of Fort Benton, but they have some fields over here near Bozeman too that they harvest for commercial industrial hemp, and I'm very excited to see the fiber coming out of it. I don't know that they're quite there yet in terms of like making it into usable fiber. Um, but perhaps they are, and I just haven't gotten my hands on it yet. But I think that that is kind of coming our way. Absolutely.
that's cool. Hemp is one of my favorite spinning fibers. And when I was
Cool.
spinning it, we had to get it from China because you couldn't get it in the United States.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is exciting then.
So it's very exciting to have a United States source for it now.
Yeah, totally. And we have also Fibershed members who have, rabbits and goats and alpacas. It's not just sheep. So there's quite a variety of Montana fiber.
People don't generally associate Montana with that, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, totally.
So what kinds of things are you doing to raise awareness?
Yeah, so I think, our mission is really around trying to connect producers with end users of fiber. And I think one of the biggest things we're doing is giving a voice to some of these producers through our member directory. So if you go onto the Montana Fibershed website, you can go to a directory which is just a big list of everyone who is a producer and artisan working with Montana Fiber in the state who has subscribed to our membership program. So one of the things I've learned through being in this world is that ranchers and fiber producers are like some of the busiest people I have ever encountered in my life. They're spread so thin, they're doing a million things. And more often than not, these folks just don't have capacity to be also like entrepreneurs and to be putting their all their product out there and making websites and doing marketing and networking to sell their goods. They're just trying to keep up with like the flock and all the things that need to happen like all year long. And so um, one of the cool things about the kind of national fibershed movement that was started by Rebecca Burgess, gosh, I think over 10 years ago, it has just been growing and growing with momentum. And there's more energy towards this concept of like soil to soil fiber systems and regionally produced wardrobes and local fiber. And so our website is associated with the bigger fiber shed, and it has a lot of SEO power. It's like very hefty with the search engine optimization. So I think that that's one of the biggest services we can really offer is to promote our businesses our Montana Fibershed businesses, connect them to markets and to opportunities by giving them a presence on the internet. Beyond that, we do a ton of educational things and events for the general public. Um, this last summer in June, we put on an event called Ranch Dressing, and it was in the Paradise Valley. And it kind of highlighted, it was out on a sheep farm, and we had all sorts of demonstrators there highlighting the entire process from shearing a sheep to carding the wool to spinning. We had people doing felting demonstrations and also flax or linen making presentations and a fashion show and all sorts of even like how to cook lamb and um, all like the whole range of the process. And it was a really cool event for people, members of the public, to come and really be able to have a hands-on experience with like where do the clothes I have come from, like from seeing the sheep and seeing the whole process all the way through. So education is a big part of our mission also.
Do you think you'll be doing a similar event this year or in 2025?
I hope so. Man, it was a lot of work. We're in a very small volunteer board, so that event was pretty massive to put on, and I really hope we can pull it together again, whether it's this year or next year, for sure. It was a huge success. So,
Do you host webinars or anything like that for your members?
so we do have kind of an annual um, meeting on Zoom with our members and also like the general public. We do a knit along every January. I'm relatively new to the board in full transparency, so I'm not familiar with a lot of the programming that's happened in the past, but um, definitely the intention is to engage as many people as possible. Um, and one thing that's kind of interesting is like we're not trying to recreate what your local weaving guild does or anything. Like I think fiber people tend to want to do a lot of the making aspects, but we're really trying to also focus on supply chain and producers and things kind of much more backtracking from the actual yarn and knitting and handcraft stuff. So we're trying to do it all, but we're also trying to be mindful of doing fewer things, but doing them really well. Um, so that's my 2025 motto, at least for Fibershed.
So Montana is a big state.
Yeah.
I always get a kind of a chuckle out of the people who say, "Oh, I know somebody in Billings. Do you know so and
Yeah.
so?" And I'm like, "Billings is an 8-hour drive for me." So Montana is a huge place. And does that, you said, the Montana group is encompasses the whole state. Does that give you some special challenges or does it give you some special opportunities?
I mean, you for sure it's a challenge in terms of like trying to do these educational events and it's just there's a lot of driving involved to get all around the state and to really have relationships with all of the producers here in Montana. You got to cover a lot of mileage to be present in all of those communities. A lot of states that have more robust textile economies have like smaller geographic fiber sheds. Um, but here, yeah, we have a lot of animals, but we have very few opportunities for like industrial processing. So we're a little bit different than a lot of the other fiber sheds. Historically, Montana has never really had this really robust textile manufacturing industry, unlike many states like in New England or down south or even in California. Our fiber shed just doesn't have access to infrastructure to be producing fabric on an industrial scale. Um, so what we have lots of wool. And aside from the couple small mills in the state who are excellent but super busy and catering mostly to like artisan weavers and knitters, we really do have more fiber in our fiber shed than we have things to do with it. So that's kind of, I think that's maybe the biggest geographic challenge from my point of view is just like trying to find enough consumers for the resources we have.
The lack of woolen mills, I know,
Mhm.
it's been a problem for a number of years.
Yeah, yeah. People have what like over a year-long waiting list.
Right.
In a future world, hopefully we could get some funding and help push along some of these maybe mills to have bigger capacities or maybe help some people start up new ones. I don't know. There's lots of opportunities, but there's a lot of like bigger challenges with the industry. People are still importing a lot of wool from other countries, unfortunately. So if there was a big high level dream for Montana Fibershed, it would be to be able to keep um, like keep the fiber produced in this state circulating in this country and be able to like avoid uh, designers, brands, fashion brands buying wool from Australia to ship in to use for their product.
I know fast fashion is a controversial topic. Are you finding as you do these educational programs that people are interested in maybe slow fashion and getting quality clothing that lasts for years or even decades? I was telling my husband the other night we were watching a show about stores that used to be open in the 1980s and 90s, and there was one called Casual Corner, and I said I still have my black wool coat that I bought at Casual Corner in 1988, and I still wear
Wow.
it because
Yeah.
it has lasted that long.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely think I'm a little biased because I'm so deep into this world, but I really do think that there is a huge desire for people to be buying things that are higher quality, produced at least domestically, if not regionally. Um, and that like it can justify the higher price point um if it's a lifetime piece, you know. Um, if it lasts you that long, if you can pass it on to your kids and like it's I think people really want to buy higher quality things, but we have some major challenges with just the way the manufacturing systems are in this country that even if you're a fashion brand with those intentions, like even accessing the material is very challenging. Um, in terms of like minimums. And I mean, I could speak at length from like kind of the designer point of view, but I think overall it's the big challenge is there's this gap in the supply chain between the actual wool being, you know, shorn from the sheep and then the designer, the fashion designer wanting to buy fabric to make their clothes out of. At some point, it needs to turn from wool into fabric. And that involves a lot of different processing elements that we just do not have available to us here in Montana, but also like there's just not a ton of capacity here in the United States to the point where it's exorbitantly expensive. And that's why it makes more sense sometimes for a fashion brand, if they want to do a piece with wool, that they are just going to import the wool fabric already knit or woven from Australia or Italy or something instead of struggling with every element of the supply chain in order to have it made. Yeah,
Do you-
this is the problem we're really facing is kind of like the intermediate stages of that process.
right. As you said, there's a gap that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
bridged. Do you partner with any other organizations? I'm thinking, I was talking to somebody who is the chairman of the Washington State Make It Yourself with Wool contest.
Oh, how cool. That's great. Um, as far as I'm aware, Fibershed, Montana Fibershed right now hasn't been partnering with any organizations, though we, like I said, have lofty goals. I recently had a great conversation with someone at Gallatin College and got excited about what it might look like to kind of partner with educational institutions to do kind of workforce training and figure out how, you know, how we could maybe bring some of this industry to Montana and train people to know how to do it because like I said, kind of historically Montana doesn't have that knowledge base and you know, we don't have old warehouses filled with machinery that we can get back up and running. But if we were to be able to invest in that as kind of part of a new manufacturing industry here in the state, it could be really exciting.
That is exciting. I'm getting excited listening to you talk about it.
Yeah, I think the important thing is just realizing that it's a long-term vision. You know, it's like not going to happen overnight. And so I think a grassroots organization like Montana Fibershed is really important, even just like just that we're around and we're like trying to educate more people and trying to get some wheels turning, and maybe big movement isn't going to be able to happen for a decade or 2 decades, but this is where it all starts.
How can people get involved?
Yeah, I think the best way to get involved is to sign up for a newsletter. We try to put out a newsletter about every month or month and a half. And follow us on Instagram, and on Facebook. And if you are interested in volunteering or maybe interested in joining our board, reach out, go to our website, and send us an email. Because we are a small organization, but we are excited about growing and having really, a presence in different communities all around this giant state. So,
That's awesome. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
oh gosh,
How many people are on your board?
right now we have 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really stellar group of folks, but like I said, we have a lot of ground to cover. So we're always looking to kind of make it more substantial so we can have a bigger impact. Um, and I don't know that I have anything else to say. I think the Fibershed mission is really relatable for a lot of people. I encourage you to even look up the kind of national Fibershed movement. And there are tons of resources out there online. And if you live outside of Montana, there might be a Fibershed near you. If you go to the main Fibershed website, there's an affiliate network, and you can see kind of geographically there are, I don't even know if I have a count, I think maybe over 100 Fibersheds. There are some in South America, there are some in Europe, they're all over the place. So it's a really exciting movement.
Well, I will put links to I'll put links to your business and to
Oh,
the Fibershed websites so that people can check those out and get more information. And
awesome. Thanks so much.
I really appreciate you being on the podcast. So thanks a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks for what you're doing, and look forward to connecting again soon.
I don't want this episode to get too long, so I will just finish up by saying the podcast website is at www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. There is a place for you to comment on each episode and check the show notes for further information. My website is www.janetszabo.com. I have a blog there, and there's a link to the blog from that website where I write about my sewing projects. So if you're curious about what it is that I'm sewing and what it looks like, that's the place to find the photos. Please consider leaving a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that really does help other people to find the podcast. And if you want to submit feedback, you can do that using the fan mail feature at the beginning of each podcast episode, or you can email me at janet@janetszabo.com. As soon as I edit this episode, I'm going to go up to my sewing area and see what kind of trouble I can get into. So until our next episode, I hope you have a great week and that you get to go sew something.